Presentation, America at a Global Crossroads, is quite interesting given what has transpired since the election in November. It is quite interesting listening, as you'll see from the video, the concerns that are expressed. And one of the things that interested me was to go back in American history and see if we were the peace-loving, gregarious nation that we're all taught in school. Well, as you're well aware, last month our president held the Army anniversary for 250 years, and the various combat commands came to Washington to parade down Constitutional Avenue. If you have 2 hours to waste, you might go on YouTube and see the Chinese military parade that occurred last week. I will not say any more, but it was quite impressive. And after I saw that, one of the issues that America has, to me, with China is China has a 4,000-year-old culture, and they have good memories. We will be 250 years old next year. And so I went and asked Perplexity, I asked it, how many military conflicts has the U.S. been in since its founding? Anyone want to take a guess?
The Civil War.
Well, do you count the Indian War?
Any conflict. Well, let me tell you, and this blew me away. We have had almost one conflict a year. We have had recorded 214 military conflicts, including 11 with formal war declarations. I mean, that blew me away. That's like, we can't adjust to peace. We have to have some kind of military conflict.
We changed the name to Department
Of War. Yes, I mean, oh God, talk about marketing. So let's start, and you'll get some insight of the conflicts we face, and then we can see the issues. And I was told all I have to do is press play. Oh, now no signal.
Turned off.
Oh,
Betting person put money anytime we use demonstration and say it's not gonna work. I just don't try to.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. Thank you.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Great Decisions
Is
Masterclass.
that loud enough?
My name is Jeffrey Morton, and it's my pleasure to once again deliver the 8-lecture series to you. Great Decisions is brought to you courtesy of the Foreign Policy Association, which for more than 1 century has promoted a broad, public, apolitical discourse in American foreign policy and world affairs. For more information about the association, please visit fpa.org. Each year, the editors of the Great Decisions Handbook select 8 challenges or great decisions facing the American public and its foreign policy makers. Experts in the field draft many chapters on each of the 8 great decisions topics. Our first topic in 2025 is American foreign policy at a crossroads. We consider this issue within the context of our newly inaugurated President, Donald J. Trump. This is not our first foreign policy crossroad. In 1919, when the First World War ended, there was a shift from one foreign policy approach, Wilsonian internationalism, to another, America First or isolationism. In 1945, when the Second World War ended, we adopted yet another approach to foreign policy. It was a bit of a hybrid strategy. It was realpolitik on the surface, focusing on power and resisting containing the Soviet Union, but at the same time promoted global free trade and democratization.
Let us not fail to grasp this supreme chance to establish a worldwide rule of reason, to create an enduring peace under the guidance of God.
Today, the Allied world salutes these representatives of 50 nations. They have made a beginning, a brave beginning that can build a mighty structure for peace.
The third cataclysmic change of the 1900s, 2 world wars followed by the end of the Cold War, created yet another crossroad for American foreign policy makers. And over the course of these past 3.5 decades, there's been a bit of a trial and error approach taken by our various presidents. We've been all over the map. And in a very short period of time, we've test tried 4 distinct foreign policy approaches. So what is so complicated about this world that we cannot settle on a single foreign policy approach? First of all, there is no obvious villain. Life was simple after World War II. There was the Soviet Union, the Communist International, and a broad public and political consensus that containing it was America's priority. Well, the Soviet Union is gone. It disintegrated into 15 countries. Do we focus now on an emerging power like China, a resurgent Russia, maybe India or the Europeans? How about a focus on middling regional powers? Countries like Iran, Iraq, North Korea, Venezuela, rogue nations. Or perhaps we should go about this thematically and say something like global terrorism should be our primary focus, and all of our foreign policy efforts should be organized around that goal. The second reason foreign policy remains at a very long crisis point is domestic politics. When the Cold War ended, again, a consensus emerged that we deserve to enjoy a dividend. We had spent 2 generations resisting the Soviets, fighting in wars in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. It was time for the U.S. to have a payoff for all of that investment. And also something of a collapse of all bipartisanship in foreign policy. There was an old saying, I learned this in the 1980s when I was studying foreign policy as an undergraduate student: politics ends at the water's edge. We're Republicans, we're Democrats and independents on tax policy, Social Security, education, and infrastructure. But when it comes to foreign policy, the political ideas go away. It's all about America's interest. That probably was never really the case, but it certainly is not the case today. Every foreign policy issue seems to be partisan. And then finally, there are just too many options at our disposal. It's the luxury of being victorious in that great struggle against the Soviet Union. We can go in most any direction that we want. We just can't figure out which direction to go to. And while many people argue that foreign policy is at a crossroads, to me it's more of a crisis. We really cannot figure out what direction we should take in foreign policy. 3 ways to organize. One way is theoretical. There's also geographic. And then finally, a bit of a hybrid, a focus on the great powers. We'll look at each of these individually. beginning theoretically with conservative realpolitik, before moving on to liberal internationalism, the neocons, and the America Firsters. So what is realpolitik, or political realism? It is the oldest theory in world politics, dating back to the 5th century before Christ. It ranks countries by their military capabilities. The focus is on high politics. Examples of high politics foreign policy issues are conflict among nations, military alliances, and arms races. Low politics are issues like trade, human rights, and the environment. According to realists, there are no permanent allies in world politics. Nations align not because of likeness, but rather because of common interest. And since those interests change with the rise and the fall of countries' powers, the allies change as well. Realists have a particularly negative view of human nature. They view the international system as anarchic and therefore conflict-prone. It isn't that realists want war to happen, it's that they expect war to happen. And according to realism, nation-states are always in one of three phases. They're either fighting a war, recovering from a war, or preparing for the next war. And so the realists anticipating war take a very militaristic approach to world affairs, and they reject free trade as well. This is a mercantilist approach to economics. Liberal internationalist dates to the Enlightenment thinkers in France and Scotland. In the United States, its first advocate was Woodrow Wilson, president during the First World War. He believed deeply in international organizations, such as the League, and international laws, because the laws clarify relations among states. It reduces uncertainty in world affairs, and of course, reduces suspicion. The job of the organizations, like the League or the present-day United Nations, is for nation-states to meet and find common ground to build upon, because the liberals believe in cooperation. They have a positive view of human nature and world affairs. To them, peace is what is normal. So when a realist identifies war, they say, this is what happens. For the idealist, the liberals, they argue this was an anomaly, it's a puzzle, we're going to figure it out and prevent it from happening again. They embrace democracy abroad, free trade, and capitalism internationally, because they believe that democracies do not go to war with other democracies, and that the more nations trade with each other, the less likely they are to go to war with each other. The neocons. Okay, first of all, this is not new at all. It is a very old leftist Marxist theory dating back to Trotsky. So it's neither neo nor is conservative, but that's the label that we use. It gravitated across the ideological spectrum to find a home in the Republican Party, especially after 9/11. According to the neocons, any and all great powers, including allies, are a possible threat to the United States, because the first goal is to remain on top of the international system. Any great power growing in military capability must be degraded by the United States. But the neocons aren't just about the great powers, they also have a theory about middling powers, regional powers, the rogue nations, for example. When they look at a country like Iraq or Afghanistan, Libya, among many others, they argue all we need to do is topple the regime. That static, statist government, once it collapses, will release a natural movement towards democracy. We can go in with a light military footprint, topple the government, and allow people to express themselves through democratic processes. This is an extraordinarily high-risk, high-cost foreign policy. The payoff would be enormous, even historic, if indeed they could reach the end line. We find from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya, it is a lot easier to theorize about the neocon goals than it is to pull them off in reality. America first. This is both quite old and also very new in the United States. A century ago, we were America Firsters. It was called isolation back then. It's simply about putting the United States, its people, and our interests first and foremost. Arguments about adversaries not being so bad are synonymous with America First. It's an essential argument to make. Because when you claim that Russia and China aren't really that bad, it means that we don't really have to be there to guard them and contain them. And beyond that, our allies really aren't that weak. Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, they're capable of standing up to China, and the Europeans can handle the war in their own backyard. The America Firsters are non-interventionist, and this was a strong position that Mr. Trump took to victory in 2016, denouncing the W. Bush administration and his interventionist foreign policy. When it comes to economics, America First pulls out the tariffs and the trade war argument, claiming that we're losing jobs to unfair labor practices and government interventions abroad, and so the America Firsters are off the free trade bandwagon. They promote a mercantilist economic approach. I'll speak a great deal more and in detail about mercantilism and free trade in Great Decisions Lecture number 2, which is about American leadership in the world economy. So we have our 4 perspectives. Each one is legitimate, they're internally consistent, and each one is a viable foreign policy approach. When we ask basic questions, then we begin to see the differences between them. For example, how internationalist should U.S. foreign policy be? The realists say international, the America Firsters say domestic. Joining the realists are the liberal internationalists and the neocons. So we have a 3-to-1 breakdown on that issue. If it's about going to war, intervention, nothing changes on our graph. America Firsters reject it, the other 3 see it as a necessity. Democracy abroad, should we be promoting it? Should we care about it? Is democracy a component of foreign policy? We get a different divide. Liberal internationalists and neocons, democracy is central to their foreign policy argument. Both believe it will prevent conflict going forward, whereas the realists and America Firsters, they're not against democracy. They just don't really care what sort of organizational principles are adopted abroad. Whether it's a democracy or a dictatorship, they're really looking at power levels more than anything else. When it comes to free trade, realist America Firsters are on one side. They don't have much of a position to take, not their issue. Whereas the liberal internationalists view free trade and interdependence as key to global peace. I'm not really sure where the neocons go. There's not a lot of discussion among them on the free trade issue, but I would place it somewhere on this side of the line. Laws and organization, the role that they should play in foreign policy, liberal internationalists view them as essential, the other 3 do not. Varying degrees of criticism of organizations and international laws. So here we have our 4 theoretical approaches to the world around us. Each one tells a very different story of how the world is put together, why it falls apart, and most importantly, how the U.S. should be guided through the turbulent global waters of international affairs. But that's not the only way to organize foreign policy. We can also look at things geographically. For example, we could say that our main focus should be our immediate neighborhood. Canada to the north, Mexico to the south, maybe a bit of Central America and the Caribbean, trading partners, geographically proximate. We could expand to include South America. We could focus, as we have historically, on Europe. We could go to Asia. We could go sub-regional if we wanted, say the Middle East. Pick a region and say that is our priority. We're going to fashion our overall foreign policy based upon our interest in that region. The case can certainly be made for Latin America as the primary focus. It is proximate geographically to the United States, which by definition means it's a great distance from the other major powers in Europe and Asia. The issues of great interest to us are linked to Latin America, whether it is trade, immigration, or the illicit movement of drugs across the border, and the obstacles to progress. They're mendable. We can resolve them. They're not the sort of issues that can never be resolved. Cuba, for example, we can sort out. Even Venezuela, maybe the toughest problem, or Haiti, the economic basket case of the region. These are issues that we can figure out if we prioritize Latin America and work with our partners there. How about Europe? This is the traditional anchor of American foreign policy. Where we find there are our fellow OECD members. Those are advanced economic and developed economies. There are common security outlooks and also common interests between the United States and our European allies. And then you get the add-on countries. It's called WEOG, Western Europe and Others Group. It would include Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Israel, not to mention all the countries of Western and Central Europe. The case for Asia, well, it begins and ends with one word, and that is China. This is one of the largest countries in the world, demographically, geographically, economically. It is an emerging great power. Many believe that a Cold War between the US and China is inevitable. We have so many interests linked to Beijing and they to Washington that we really should focus principally our global approach to the People's Republic of China. Enormous market population, tremendous opportunities, not only in China, but India, which is larger now demographically, Japan, among many others. We have allies in this region. ANZUS includes Australia and New Zealand. We have the Quad Alliance that ties in Japan and India. A lot of reason to focus on Asia. And it also would reflect a continuation of Mr. Obama's foreign policy of pivoting away from the Middle East and towards the Pacific Rim. How about Africa? A region we rarely talk about in foreign policy circles. It is, after all, the fastest growing region of the world, demographically and economically. Tremendous opportunities can be found there. We also have a vested interest in fighting global terrorism in Africa. We have special operations forces throughout the continent training units in anti-terrorism. We also have the benefit over the Europeans in that we don't have a colonial history of Africa. So for these reasons, maybe Africa should be our focus. The only region I would argue against is the Middle East. After all, this is the place where American foreign policy dreams go to die. We've had very little success in interventions in the region, very painful and failed endeavors. The only truly meaningful ally we have in the entire region of 24 countries is Israel, and our influence is declining. In Israel, the Arab states, the non-Arab states, non-state actors, U.S. influence is not particularly high in the Middle Eastern region, and for these reasons, many people believe that we should not overly commit to this part of the world. You might ask yourself, do I really have to choose between a theoretical approach and a geographic approach? Is there a mix and match opportunity? Well, I suppose that is possible. You can pick a different theory to apply to each region of the world, whichever you feel is most useful. For Europe, for example, we could go with realpolitik. There is, after all, a hot war underway in Ukraine. Military assistance to that beleaguered country is essential, many argue, for European security. In Asia, perhaps an America First approach, you might argue. China is undermining us economically with its trade policies. Let's erect some tariff barriers, perhaps additional quotas on trade and volume of exports. So America First for that region. For Latin America, promotion of democracy and free trade, market principles might work. Africa could be realpolitik, it could be liberal internationalism, it could be almost any approach, I would say, with the exception of neoconservatism, which I just don't see as a viable foreign policy strategy. Finally, we have the approach of focusing on the great powers. This is theoretical, but it is also geographic at the same time. In order to fashion a foreign policy on the great powers, we first have to figure out who exactly they are. First of all, a great power is large and impressive. It's noticeable. It's the sort of country you look at and say, just an eyeball's glance, that's a player in world politics. Highly capable, especially on a military level, with force projection. It can fight wars locally, it can fight wars long distance, and it tends to win the wars that it fights. Its interests are defined broadly, continentally or even globally, and is viewed by the existing great powers as a member of this elite club. So reputation has a role to play in determining the great powers at any time in world history. Countries enter and exit the great power system all the time. 1898 was the American entry by virtue of our victory over Spain, not only in our hemisphere but also in the Pacific, the War of Philippines, and with that Spain declined and exited from the great power club. In 1905, at the latest, Imperial Japan enters by virtue of its victory over Russia. I would put Japan in the club in 1895 with his victory over China, but most historians disagree. When the First World War ended, empires were in ashes. The Austro-Hungarian Empire was gone, certainly can't be a great power, and we'd say the exact same thing about the Ottoman Empire. In 2000, we have the most recent entry into the Great Power Club, and that is the People's Republic of China. I mean, you might say 1995 or 2005. These are general time frames. The hierarchy of great powers today. At the regional level, Israel, South Africa, Mexico perhaps. These are not countries we would ever confuse with a great power. They are greatly limited, each and every one of them, on different principles. Major powers are a collection of allies that make up the European Union. India, certainly a major power, probably Brazil, in Latin America. But the focus is on the great powers, and those number three: United States, Russia, and China. These are the three most influential countries in the world. These are the countries upon which the security of the international system is based, and therefore they would be the focus of a great powers-based foreign policy. It's called a tripolar system. We have three great powers. It's not the most usual distribution of power since 1500 and the onset of modern world politics. Currently, the configuration looks like this. Russia and China are aligned, counterbalancing to the best of their abilities the United States. It's possible at the same time that we could evolve into this sort of an arrangement where China and Russia are no longer closely aligned. The three powers are aligning and counter-aligning with each other and outsiders as well. The most ideal would be the three great powers working together, identifying common interests like global security, trade relations, global warming, among many, many others. Without question, in 2025, we're here. The goal of foreign policy, according to this theory, should be to prevent both Russia and China from growing to the point of outbalancing the United States, something I think is highly unlikely. But a secondary goal would be to seek the transition to this, where we're at least counterbalancing in a more fluid approach, and then finally to cooperation, to promote not only our interest and theirs, but also that of the international system. And before one says this doesn't seem likely to me, think back to the early 1970s, when China and Russia were aligned together. Richard Nixon visits China, plays the so-called China card, and all of a sudden the tripolar system looks very different, and détente becomes the theme of the 1970s. So there you have it, three different ways to look at American foreign policy. Theoretically, there are four options. Geographically, almost no limit to the number of regions and sub-regions, or perhaps a combination of the two with a great power strategy. Plenty of fodder for your conversations in your Great Decisions community groups. As always, I thank you for attending this lecture and encourage you to stay engaged and make great decisions.
Okay. Questions, comments, observations? All of us, not all of us, but many of us have lived, at least served in World War, a number of you served in World War II and saw the aftermath of what transpired. We've experienced both the Cold War, the opening to me of China in the late 70s, and then its acceptance into the World Trade Organizations and what the aftermath of that would be. And now we've seen what has been transpiring since the election of President Trump. So I would hope we would have at least some comment on what you envision or how you envision our foreign policy can it be enhanced or can it be improved to sort of take into account what it was said in the presentation, a tripolar world. Any observations on your thoughts of how our foreign policy will evolve, or what do you feel are better ways? It seems to me, my observation is things are getting worse, both with the alliance of the Soviet or Russia and China, and also a number of the other countries that attended the Ginseng event in Peking last week. Yeah. So anyone, comments, observations? Someone, please? Yes.
I don't know much about politics, but when I heard about that meeting, I was very concerned because it seemed to me that what was being planned was the first attempts at trying to move towards a situation where you have 3 or 4 of the great powers trying to align themselves with one another, and then disaligning with the United States. So it seems that there is a move towards an increase of the number of powers, large powers, powerful powers that will align together in order to come against the United States.
Any other comments, Lee, or yes?
Well, this, as you mentioned, this has not been updated. What's happened in Beijing just recently is India has moved out of the Quad, into the China orbit.
Into the Quad, I'm sorry.
China.
I say we've lost India, it looks like, from being in the Quad, which was U.S., India, Australia, New Zealand, to China and the Soviet Union, because they were holding hands with Putin. Modi was holding hands with Putin in China.
You know, and part of it was a reaction to the U.S. tariff policies, which has literally antagonized every country in the world. Lee?
It's hard to figure out what the theoretical framework of this administration is.
Okay, I found this on the web for you.
He's gonna tell you.
Yeah, Mr. Google. No, he started out with huge tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Canada didn't even feature in this whole presentation. And then he's been antagonistic to the 50% tariffs on Brazil, 50% tariffs on India, very tough tariffs on people who should be our allies and we would want to have allies. So it shouldn't be a surprise that China feels strong enough to invite the Indians and hold hands with them. And I think it's hard to know what the theory is. If you, there's the notion of hard power and soft power, and they're just keep throwing away soft power. And I think, again, attacking, we knew from the first month, attacking Canada and Mexico and eliminating USAID was bound to be costly to our alliances.
It seems to me we're evolving into a two-power world, if we, at best. One power is clearly the emerging Russia, China, North Korea axis, and the other power could be us and the like-minded countries of used to be in the Quad and used to be partners with us in NATO. But we're moving away from that, seem to push away everybody and be us against the world, which to me is just a losing strategy.
This is my paranoia speaking, but I wonder if there's something else afoot, i.e. that Trump is trying to isolate the United States, and then he'll say something like, I need to take control and convert democracy to a totalitarian government, and then go back in with India, China, Russia, North Korea, and that's my fear.
Anyone?
It seems to me the greatest positive thing that we can do for peace is trade. And we had successful trade with other free powers until this administration. And it also seems to me the greatest negative for trade are tariffs. And that's what we've done. And we have antagonized other nations and other powers, and they have been motivated to align against us.
No, I mean, teaching economics, one of the things that I observe is the U.S., because of our trade deficit, when a country has a trade deficit, other countries have trade surpluses. And trade surpluses contribute to a country's gross domestic product. So our trade deficit was actually a benefit to the rest of the world in terms of promoting economic growth. And I think part of that, I'm not sure, I would think that at least some of the economists recognize that in essence, was the trade deficits a benefit to us because it benefited other countries. And we benefited also. If you look at the cost of goods, not services, but of goods, the price of TVs, the price of toys, the price of clothing have decreased in some cases quite dramatically. So for all the administration has said that the rest of the world is ripping us off because we're running a trade deficit, you and I as consumers benefited. Now, people who made clothes, workers who made toys in the U.S. suffered. But the concern or the issue that I have with it is our response to their needs was rather minimal. I wouldn't say minimal, but disjointed. I don't know, all of us have never had the opportunity to apply for food stamps or SNAP or Medicaid, not Medicare. Medicare is pretty transparent. What happened when we turned 65?
We get Medicare period. And
Yeah.
whether we want it or not.
Yeah, that's very true, okay? But if you apply for Medicaid, go look at the application required to receive Medicaid. And all of us are well-educated individuals. Probably all of us have at least a college degree. Many of us advanced degrees. Take a look at the Medicaid application. And then you're dealing with people who in many cases, educational attainment was, I was a high school dropout. So, and for many of the people who worked in these factories, you know, it was sort of, you know, like coal miner families. They just went on to that. Now, Lee, you worked with the union workers. What is your view?
Which question?
Well, about the need for providing them with benefits, a comprehensive set of.
I think our society holds together better if people are not, and their children are not starving or really suffering badly economically. And communities, particularly smaller communities where the industry is shut down and displaced by imports of some sort, those are really suffering. And there's a reason that people are upset in those communities.
But how about our government's response to that issue?
Well, it's fluctuated. Over time, we provided more and more income and in-kind support, whether it's health care or education or child care or various kinds of issues. And in the most recent budget, we've scaled it back. SNAP or food support and Medicaid support. Medicaid. That's it.
Oh, thank you.
I wonder if we could look at the question number 2.
Okay.
I'm concerned about Ukraine and the change of policy of Ukraine. So it says Western states and the global South, broadly speaking, have different views of the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the global principles that are at stake. I don't know. I know Europe and the United States traditionally have supported Ukraine. I don't know what the rest of the world is doing.
Well, I think Turkey may be helping with drones, but Ukraine has developed its own drone industry with some very sophisticated drones. And I think, you know, what has happened is the U.S. allows the EU to buy weapons from us, and then the EU ships them to, but I'm not sure, Russia has drawn weapons from Iran, China, North Korea. I'm just not sure, and I think we have placed limitations on the weapons or the capabilities of the weapons we're allowing Ukraine to use.
It seems like Ukraine is one of those issues that is dividing the world.
Yes, and it's quite obvious that Putin wants to take control, and I'm not sure we're being as, call it aggressive as we could be. I think somehow or another our president thinks that he will be the great peacemaker. And I'm not sure that will happen. I think Russia understands that they can literally, I think they are able to do what they want and with almost zero consequences. And I'm not sure how much longer this can continue without critical losses in Ukraine. Anyone else? Monty?
We don't have a policy. Okay, now.
Monty needs to.
As of now, we don't have a policy. The only policy Trump is following is basically whatever he can get to benefit himself. Wealth or otherwise. And that's what his interest is. And if he continues along, we may lose being the one of the three strong powers that's mentioned. So I think our concern should be more not foreign policy. Our concern should be our domestic policy. How do we maintain the very strong position we had maintained the Second World War? And that's what the only way to do that is basically get our house domestic policy in shape.
No. Anyone else? Any other? Yes. Oh, Robert.
I recently saw an interview with one of the high officials of a former administration. I forget whether it was a Republican or Democratic administration. And his view was if you want to have peace in Ukraine, the president has to deliver an ultimatum to Putin that says three things. One, if you don't come up with a reasonable peace soon, we will do three things. One, we will ship maximum effort of weapons to Ukraine and supply funds for the Ukrainians to buy them elsewhere. Second, we will put maximum sanctions on Russia, and the economy in Russia is always somewhat shaky. And the third, he says, will come out publicly in favor of NATO membership for Ukraine, which of course is a non-starter for Putin. He said if you came out with those three things, Putin might have an incentive to make a deal. He doesn't have any incentive now because he thinks he's winning, and he will continue to win with us doing a half-baked effort at most.
Anyone else?
To answer Betsy's question, what about the global south? I mean, Brazil, South Africa, India, regional powers are staying neutral. They're not taking the U.S. and Western European side on this war. They're not, to my knowledge, sending direct support to the Russians, but the global south is skeptical about getting involved, and they think that it's part of the Russian argument that we provoked the Russians by reneging on what they thought was an understanding that NATO wouldn't move as far east as it's gone.
Yeah, no, that's a good point with the global south. I mean, and there are other issues that we face that literally weren't, climate change. Look what we are, again, have become an outlier in terms of addressing climate change. Okay, and it's an issue that no one really speaks about. We have seen a greater fragmentation. For much of the post-war period, we have made an effort to bring together countries and through trade to improve their well-being. And also, with trade, we hope to make an improvement in ours. And we have. I mean, we're still, I think maybe some of the Scandinavian countries may have higher per capita income, but our per capita income dwarfs most of the world. It's substantially higher. Now, how equal it is another question, the equality issue. But, until, it won't be, at least to me, not through this administration, but until somebody offers alternative policies that are acceptable to the majority, and it almost appears now we're sort of divided into American firsters, the MAGA supporters make up about a third of the population. Senator Sanders, Bernie, and have about a third to the left, and there's a third of us in the center. Now, how the Venn diagram converges those three to get a majority, I don't know. But I would hope that there is a leader in this country who is able to bring the three parties, or at least to create a suitable working majority. I am not very optimistic of the ensuing future. I have always been a very optimistic person, so you'll have to excuse my pessimism. Any other comments, suggestions? I know it's difficult getting through these 6 questions in 30 minutes and spending 5 minutes, but does anyone else have any comments, let me see if there's, does the U.S. still have the power and interest to play a linchpin role in the global system, or should it begin to yield to leadership by other states? At least my observation is China is making an effort to assume leadership. It sees itself as an ancient civilization that was once the dominant power in the world. One of the other things is, except for the Mongols and whatever thousands of years ago, China has never been an aggressive country. It has always been the recipient of military action. And it's never, at least to my limited knowledge, has been an expansionary country. So we'll see if that policy continues through the future. Any other comments, concerns, solutions? Anyone have a back pocket solution? Okay. Well, a few minutes early. No one else? Thank you all for your attendance, and I appreciate your willingness to listen to me. So thank you. Thank you, Maria.